The 2024 Africa Financial Industries Summit, put together by Jeune Afrique Media Group and the International Finance Corporation, has kicked off in Casablanca, Morocco. Let's cross over live to Morocco, where Arise business correspondent Rota Sotiris moderated a panel on innovative climate finance solutions for the African continent.
And this has been growing over the years as well. So since 2015, in 2011, you'll be asking yourself, what happened between 2011 and 2015? We were obviously dedicating resources to green finance, but we weren't really reporting by then. So we started reporting from 2015. You should also know that there are various mechanisms that have been put in place to make sure that, we don't double count, we don't do greenwashing. We ensure that, what is committed is really committed, and we ensure that we have a third party that actually looks at all the data before it is totally published. Next. So how is this structured? If you look at the clear image of it, the 288 billion, so about 281.9 dedicated to climate finance, 3.8 to biodiversity, and the other environmental objectives to 2 billion. So mitigation have a large portion of that, 244, have about 5.6, and adaptation alone 31.6, which is very good. And as we are growing, we believe that huge share in the next coming years, considering the various needs that we have and we are seeing at the moment. Next. So how is the finance really structured? The 288 billion. If you look at it, most part are non-concessional loans. So you see the one highlighted in blue are non-concessional. The green part are concessional, mixed with grants and unattributed loans, with other instruments being grants. But our main reason to also work as part of our objective since we took on the presidency, the chairmanship of the club, is to literally work on instruments that will provide more concessionality. So those are some of the initiatives that we've initiated, and I think in the coming years the results will be adamant and very fruitful for the rest of the activities that we do. Next. So I believe this might pop up a few questions later on, but when you look at the distribution slightly, you'll see that major share of the funding went to East Asia and Pacific, whilst when you look at the Sub-Saharan African, we stood at about maybe 2%, or 5.1 to 2.1 billion, were the one attributed between the Middle East and North Africa, and also on the Sub-Saharan Africa. When you look at the Latin America one, about 11.6. So we can definitely see Western Europe being about 55 billion. So that's a huge chunk. So we can definitely see that we are the ones receiving the least of financing, whilst we are the ones that need it the most, and we are the ones that emit less. So this is why we were talking about the cost of capital. This is why we are talking about instruments that will provide more concessionality. This is why we are talking about a strengthening capacity to make sure that the projects that we also present that needs funding can get funding, because turning an idea into a project and ensuring that this is aligned with all the criteria to mobilize resources, it isn't an easy affair. I'm sure Bill, the director, would highlight some of the key challenges and also what they've been able to do. So this is something that we are working on within the club, and we also want to partner with other members of the African financial industry here present to see how best we can conjugate efforts to ensure that this is improved. So what are some of the solutions that we are providing? So as you know, we have the working groups on the various elements, SDG, climate finance, biodiversity, gender equality and development cooperation. We are more than happy to receive ideas and also to work with you on those fronts. We have the advocacy role in major events. We have research and knowledge and also accountability as we report. And our partnerships and our position papers and our tools that are developed within the IDFC facility. So we have a climate toolbox, we have a GAG toolbox and a biodiversity toolbox. We have an integration trackers of the SDGs that are available also. So, for example, we've used some of these items this year to assess how well our members are aligned, when it comes to SDG, to show the gaps between their operations and how well they align, so as to help them, better align themselves to the Paris Agreement. The GHG Toolbox allows you to definitely estimate your emissions generally, and this helps you design perhaps a neutrality plan that would allow you to reduce on your emission and perhaps develop, carbon neutrality mechanisms. So we have the green finance mapping on the reporting side, the gender finance as well, reporting that we began this year as well, to see how well the funding that we are committing are also gender. And the C4D report, of course, being the Cooperation for Development that we're trying to foster with, as of next year, a forum focusing on investment only that is being organized by the Cooperation for Development, organized by the Development Bank of South Africa and also BOAD and the rest of the IDFC members as of next year, on the sideline of Fix 2025, which I believe the Secretary General would also mention at some point. Next. So we looked at the African financial industry and some of the various challenges or main barriers that could, that are coming up, and we see that there's also a lack of mandate between the national development banks and in the private sector. The national development banks have a clear mandate from the government, but not all, African countries have national development banks. In fact, looking at figures, we believe it's only 9 national development banks that the African continent has. So most of the mandate is left with the MDBs and the regional banks. So there's a lack of mandate. There's also the difficulty setting up an appraisal process, a lack of suitable projects in countries. So it takes some sort of expertise to also make sure that those projects are aligned with criteria. There's also difficulty identifying suitable projects. So what are the main barriers in setting up a climate strategy, for example? And when you look at the private sector and the private banks, for example, most of them do not have a climate strategy. So there's a limited capacity. There's also a lack of mandate that's there, limited understanding of climate risk, and also the capacities, so the human resource side. And this is where we believe that we can provide, solutions as part of the IDFC and as part of what the West African Development Bank is also doing. We've also noticed main barriers in scaling up financing for adaptation, for example, which is very important for us, considering we are paying the price for climate change. Again, the lack of mandate, the difficulty in setting up an appraisal and suitable projects, and again, a suitable project in adaptation and also in mitigation at some point. Sometimes they work. Human resource, I mentioned that earlier, and also technical knowledge, and we are here as IDFC to provide some sort of, knowledge sharing and also solutions for the African financial industry. And feel free to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to cooperate. Next. You could see that some of the members, for example, of the looking at the African financial industry as a whole, some of them do have the Paris Agreement alignment assessment on their own. Some of them also were able to identify gaps as to how they could be fully aligned. And those ones that are on the early journey on climate finance mainstreaming in their operations, we also noticed a fast-track onboarding program to provide members with basic tools, so we could provide that to you. The objective is to trigger a virtuous circle by engaging members, partners in robust climate finance operations. We can definitely help out with that. For all members and partners, we have tools and trainings to support the discussion between MDBs and NDBs and the IDFC, and also massive support program for improving members' capacity to track and report on climate finance, and also participation in joint opportunities. I believe at the end of the session, there will be a video that we're playing on the capacity building that the climate facility is providing. So that will come up at some later stage. Next. So our service directory, so we have the knowledge sharing part. We have international workshop that we organize that, you can definitely partake in. We also have the direct consulting. At the organizational level, we have sectoral tools, process and advisory that we can provide. We have a mentoring program that's currently going on. we can definitely do joint opportunities and put you in touch with other members that will be interested also in partnering with you. We have at institutional level, we can work with you on your vision and your strategy, on a climate strategy and the policies and alignment of your activities with the Paris Agreement. And then definitely join high-level events that we can definitely attend or co-organize together. And also ease your daily operations through the application of practical tools that we already developed and we've seen working already for you. I believe this ends the presentation, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you very much. Back to you, Rochus.
Fantastic. That was a really great presentation. Thank you very much, Komlavi. The cost of capital, the difference across different countries, only 9 development banks. But of course, there's a big opportunity here, and you guys at the IDFC doing a full court press to get climate financing going. Let me kick off now with the panel. I'll start off with Mubarak Kalai, who, of course, Mukalai, who is the Director of Financing and Sustainable Development at the West African Development Bank. Can you also piggyback off the president's comments on what BOED is doing with respect to climate finance and how that can be replicated across the continent with respect to Komlavi's presentation and how the countries are different?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share what the bank has been doing. Initially, when we started looking at the gaps of the resources needed to fund the SDGs. And when you look at it, there is a huge need of resources. It's accounted to 1.3 trillion per year from now to 2030. So it's an enormous need of resources. And to support the resource need of the countries, BOED develops instruments to actually bring in other types of resources that we normally don't have access to. And doing that, BOED has a track record of resource mobilization, and resource mobilization is not an issue for BOED, knowing with the past history. But what we are looking at is the quality of the money that we bring to the table, the quality of the money that we bring to the table. And we have realized that money is not the issue. The main issue that we have in our region is the quality of the project that we develop, and to match it with the quality of the money that we can mobilize on the capital markets. And what we are doing is that with the different various funds that we are accredited to, what we do is that bringing those funds to blend them with the capital market resources to bring more concessionality to the projects and to the resources that we develop and we mobilize on the capital markets. When looking at the resources needed to implement the Paris Agreement, about 70 to 80% of those resources will definitely come from the private sector. And one of the things that private sector is looking at when developing projects is the return rate on investment. When you take the period 2020 to 2022 alone, Sub-Saharan Africa private sector has mobilized $2.4 billion to finance COVID, the fight against COVID, and with a very high return rate on investment. And it clearly shows you that if you have projects that have high return rate on investment, you can mobilize a lot of resources. At the same time, from 2015, is less than 1.2 billion to finance climate risk and climate change projects. So we've done an assessment and realized that what we need is actually a strong project development instruments. And so BOED has developed since the COP in Dubai a project development facility, and to support the project development, things that we have also realized is that people come with projects, but without taking into consideration the eligibility criteria of the donors or the funding instrument that they're going to. The facility has actually helped us to start developing project pipelines, because one of the things that we also realize in our region is that we finance emergency. We finance so much emergency, and of course, because of climate emergencies without having programs. So what we've been doing is developing a portfolio of projects, pipelines with the countries, and we have also realized that with that we have a strong because we develop a strong project core line, and when we have GCF, the JEF, and adaptation fund that bring in the money to bring concessionality, we are able to attract private sector with the resources, with the money. So there is a new kind of money that we are able to tap into to bring to the table to arrange this. So one of the things that we're also doing is the capacity enhancement of the people to develop that project. Because one of the things that we also realize with the funds that we have been mobilizing is that only 40% of the resources mobilized in climate finance are actually implemented. And implementation is also a huge issue. So we've since the beginning of this year, we've developed our new strategy is to have a development unit that supports the development of projects, but we also have an implementation unit that goes on the ground, supports the implementation, works hand in hand with project developers and the donors and the facilities and the climate funds to make sure that the projects are implemented. And we've seen that there is a concrete result that works on that. One of the things that we're also working on to make sure that everybody doesn't have an issue with mobilizing money, but because we go on the capital market, we mobilize. And one of the things that we are working on is how we can bring people, the friends that we can have around the table. You say, show me your friends and I tell you who you are. So basically what we are doing is that we're making sure that in our capital, we have very strong partners that support us so that we can go on the capital market and mobilize better money. Like I said earlier, the quality of money is very important. In the capacity arrangement, we're developing strong partnerships. And one of the very good partners that we have is the UNFCCC, with whom we have developed the Regional Collaboration Center to support the implementation, the alignment of strategies with the Paris Agreement, so institutions, arrangement, and all that. One of the things that we're also doing, and one of very important partners, KfW, German government, that we're working with, support the Article 6 implementation, the carbon markets, to mobilize our carbon resources. So we have the West African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance in the region as well, to have a regional institutional arrangement to make sure that we can also tap into the carbon markets. We are also working with the IFC, the regulators in the region as well, to develop a center, Sustainable Development Center, to actually speak the same language. Because one of the things that we also do as financial institutions is that we think people need our money, so we come with our rules, we come with our relation, without listening to what they actually need. So what we are actually doing is that we also work hand in hand with the project developers to make sure that what they actually need is what we provide to them. There is a project assessment that I always like to talk about, which is very interesting. We went to do on the ground, where they built homes for shuttles, for cattle and all that. And 2 years after they went to do the assessment, the cattle are still outside, and the people were actually using the room of the cattle. Don't have a quality rooms, and then you're building that for the cattle. So you need to make sure that that assessment is done, and we're working hand in hand to make sure that all that is done. And one of the things that we're also working on, and which is a very powerful resource mobilization, is our monitoring and reporting instruments that we put on the ground to show our investors that we are actually using the money where they want us to use it and why we mobilize them. So we're actually developing a very powerful monitoring system to make sure that all that comes in our resource mobilization strategy to enable us to go on the capital market to mobilize a lot of money. So there are various instruments that we're developing, and one of the things that we're also working with the GCF with is the guarantee instrument to make sure that, of course, we are talking about the private sector, and our countries mainly don't have that attractiveness because private sector is not sure that if I put money, political changes and all that, if my money is going to come back. So we're working with GCF because, of course, they promised us to give us 100 billion a year, but it will never come. It doesn't come. So what we are trying to do is that make sure that the little money that they have, they develop instruments to attract private sector, so the private sector bring out the money. So those are the kind of development we are doing, and we believe that partnerships as well will make sure that we work on hand in hand. I know we're working with other partners to develop country platforms as well, so that when you go in a country, instead of just developing an instrument, developing project, you actually look at what the country needs, so that if Bewade is doing one from 1 to 5, when EcoBank comes or when whoever comes, they do from 6 to 10 instead of restarting from 1 to 5. And that's also a resource mobilization instrument that we're putting together with countries with But those are the kind of instruments that we're working together with our partners to make sure that our resource mobilization is also a strategy that we can put together on the table. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mubarak Mukaila. I do want to recognize Mr. Ibrahim Diouf, who's the Special Advisory of the West. Thank you so much for being with us. So look, very robust answer there. You've got to attack this from various angles. You've got to make sure the quality of money is there. You have to make sure you assess the projects properly and listen to what the needs are. Let me bring in Adama Mariko, Secretary General of the Finance in Common Movement. I do want you to tell us about that, Finance in Common Movement. And also, I do want you to speak to resource mobilization. You know, what does it look like from your vantage point?
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm going to first thank our colleagues from BOAD and the leadership they are playing also in the IDFC. This is also a way to say the public development banks collaborate. And I think the partnership should be by design in our ecosystem, because we cannot do it alone as a development bank. And even though we find those $4 trillion gap, we cannot implement it from one perspective without good development banking system that originate enough projects in a good quality. So that's what Finance in Common is about. And just to also recall that IDFC have seeded what is Finance in Common now, the coalition of 530 public development banks around the world, from Africa, Latin America, North Africa, even in the US, in Europe, in Asia. This group is working together in order to showcase what the development banks can do. They represent together 23 trillion of total asset. And of course, you have a problem of allocation within this 23 trillion. And the reality of the public development banks in Africa is not the same in Europe. And it has been also shown at a smaller level, which is the IDFC club. But public development banks, they bring every year 2.5 trillion of assets that they are investing. And these are not pledges. It's actual commitments that they have in their balance sheet, the projects they are disbursing. So it's action towards more social equality, better agriculture system, education, etc., etc. Is it enough? Probably not. Just see that in a country, at the national perspective, 90% of the development banks that exist today work for their national ground. They don't have any international activity. But the one you see is like an iceberg, right? It's a 10% of BOADs, AFDs, World Banks, etc., etc. So you see those, but the main activity of development banking is in the countries, right? In Africa, for instance, you have more or less 100 public development banks, in 50 countries.